morning everyone, this is Shivani Agarwal. I am the Faculty of Information Technology in AKGEC Engineering College, Ghaziabad. So today my topic is requirement engineering. So what is requirement basically? Requirement means what to do, not focus on how it will done. So basically produce one large document that is written in the natural language and it give the description of the basic system, that is what the system will do, that not dependent how it will done. So this is the basic definition of the requirement, So when we have the requirements or when we have to collect the requirements, so that requirements collected by any system for the system, that is totally dependent on what the system will do, that not describe that how it will done. So we have to focus only what are the requirements of that particular system or how we have to achieve the goal of by explaining these requirements. So what the system will do. So basically it totally focused on what the system will do, not going the internal part of the system, that is the how the system will done. So the basic or the crucial steps are quality of product. How we have to produce the quality product. So we process that document without the detailed description of the document. It means we always fly in the outer document, not go into the internal documents. So we totally depend on the how what the system will do, not depends or depicts on the how it will done. So this is the basic of the requirement part. Now developers do not know what to build. This is totally emphasize the requirement analysis part. That means we know about each and every prototype of the system, how the prototype we have to define in the system, how the system will define the number of elaborators of that particular document, and customer do not know what to expect. So this is totally dependent on the what the system will do, not to the how it will done. So these validations are not required in this particular system. This is the requirement analysis phase. Now these are the steps of requirement engineering. These are the basic steps of requirement engineering. When you have to define any requirement of any system, then you have to dependent on these all the steps, because we know about the problem statement, then we have to focus on that problem statement, and we know about that how we have to resolve this problem statement. But in the requirement engineering we have to focus only the what this problem statement we have to resolve. So this is the basic of the requirement engineering, right? So these are the basic steps of requirement engineering. These are requirement elicitation, requirement analysis, requirement documentation, and the requirement review. So first step that we have to focus, that is the requirement elicitation part. So what is requirement elicitation? This is the very important term in the requirement engineering, that is requirement elicitation. Elicitation is what? Elicitation means we have to gather the requirement. Gather means collect the requirements. So the requirement engineering is the discipline application to prove the principles, the agenda, the methods, the scope of the system that we have to notify by the notations of that particular proposed system, that we have to identify the basic requirements of that particular problem statement. So we have to emphasize what the system will do when we have to collect each and every requirement related with that problem statement. So this is basically the requirement elicitation definition. Now the one important point is right there, that is SRS. SRS means software requirement specification. This is a document that we have to create it with the presence of the customer and the developers, or the team of the developers, or the team of the customer. So basically it is a contract between the developer and the customer. So basically it is the team of the developer and the customer that sit in the table, and it defines a documentation with respect to the problem statement. Now they all define the set of rules, set of methods, set of disciplines to find out the solution of that particular problem or define the requirement of that particular problem. So some state of practice that defines how the requirements are difficult to uncover. So the basic points are, first is requirement change. Actually, in every phase or in every documentation, in every time, customer demands change according to the market, or customer demand change according by the day, or by the mind steps. So the requirements are not consistent with the customer side. So if the requirements are completely changed, so these requirements are totally undiscovered requirements. So the collection of the requirements are very very unfruitful way to collect according to the user side. So this is the first. Second is the over reliance on the case tools. Case tools means computer aided software engineering tools. So these tools are used for defining the requirements. So these are the basic over reliance on the case tools. So these are the basic points that we have to define, that requirements are difficult to uncover. When these points are due, then the requirements are very difficult to discover for designing or for analyze the problem statement. Third point is tight project schedule. When the project schedule is completely tight, that means we have to define the agenda, or we have to define the time of each and every module that is fixed, that is not slightly different, or the soft making tools. So if these schedule is tight and every time the requirement of the user is changed, so we have not developed the project at the defined schedule time. So this is very difficult. Now the communication barriers. Maybe the client language is English, the developer language is maybe Italian or maybe Hindi. So the communication gap between the developer and the customer is a barrier. It creates a barrier for creating or for taking the requirements from the customer side, or for defining the requirements from the customer to the developer, or developer also cannot define the proper agenda of the problem with respect in front of the customer. So this is a very difficult step, that the communication barrier, because the communication part is very important between the developer and the customer. So this is also a very difficult point. And the next is the market driven software development. Market driven software development means we don't know about the conditions of the market for that particular problem. We don't know about the market values of that particular problem. So this is also a very difficult step for discover the requirements of this particular problem. And the lack of resources. This is a very important task. That is, when we don't have the resources and we don't have the pupils for developing that particular project. So this is a very difficult task to give that particular assignment in the defined time, defined cost, or defined budget. So these are the some points that are very important for gathering the requirements. Now, type of requirements. Basically, requirements are of three types. First is known requirements, second is unknown, and third is undreamed requirements. So what is known, what is unknown, and what is undreamed requirements? Basically, known requirements means those requirements, those are easily concerned about between the customer and the developer. Those requirements are generalized requirements that the customer know about these requirements, the developer know about these requirements. Those are the known requirements that are already discussed between the customer and the developer. These are the known requirements. Unknown requirements, when the workflow is going upper in the upper side. So the developer find out some requirements. Those are the unknown requirements. Basically, these requirements also doesn't know about the customer side. So these are the unknown requirements. And third is the undreamed requirements. Undreamed requirements means undreamed means those requirements, those are not kept in the mind of the customer or the developer. So those are the undreamed. Means, so for example, if we say that the system is crashed at the time of the requirement collection of the requirements. So these are the undreamed requirements because the cost of the system is increased right now, and so these are the undreamed requirements. Now, stakeholder. What is stakeholder? A stakeholder is a person which is directly or indirectly relate of that particular project. So these are this known as the stakeholder. Anyone who should have direct or indirect influence on the system requirements. So this is the stakeholder. So basically, a stakeholder is a person. This is either developer, either customer, or any person which are directly relate with that particular system that we have to develop at the developer site, or we have to collect the requirements for that particular system. So stakeholder is that. Now, the basic requirements are of two types. These are the functional and the non-functional requirements. So what is functional and what is non-functional requirement? Functional requirements means it describes what the software has to do. What the software has to do, what the software product has to do, how we have to develop the software product. So how many requirements are required for developing that particular project. So these are the functional requirements. These are the main requirements. So these are the functional requirements. Those requirements, those are used for the product functionally. So these are the functional requirements. Non-functional requirements are those are completely dependent on the quality purpose. So these are the most quality requirements. So these are the non-functional requirements. So non-functional requirement means how well the software does, what it has to do. So these are the non-functional. These requirements totally emphasize the quality functions. So these are the non-functional requirements. So basically, these non-functional requirements are divided for the customer side or for the developer side. So the basic non-functional requirements for the user sides are availability, reliability, usability, and the flexibility. Availability means each and every document that required by the user. This is the availability of that particular document. Reliability means we have to rely on that document that is defined by the developer or by the user, or maybe a SRS. So these are the reliability. So users always rely that particular project. Usability, the product is completely usable for the user point of view. So these are the usability points. So these are the non-functional requirement. And the flexibility, when the user want to add more changes or user want to add on some things. So these are the flexibility. So these are the basic four fundamental steps. Those are used for defining the non-functional requirement for the user point of view. Now, these 3 points are completely included for the developer's point of view. These are the maintainability. How the software we have to maintain after deliver that particular software to the user side. So how we have to maintain that software. This is the yearly basis by the AMCs, or this is completely the monthly basis. So this is the maintainability part. Now the portability part. Portability means when the developer develop any project, so that particular project we have to port from one version to the another version, or from one language to the another language. So this is portability. Now the testability, which type of testing the developer used for test the project, that is either the unit testing, integration, volume, stress, any type of testing. So this is the testability part. Now the requirement illustration. So we know that requirement illustration means we have to gather the requirements. We have to gather the requirements, but from which? So we take the requirements from the users, customer, and the other stakeholders. I already explained about the stakeholders, that is the directly or indirectly relate with the project. So this is the stakeholder. So that is either user, customer, or any person that is directly interact with the system. So these are the stakeholders. So requirement elicitation means it is a practice of researching and discovering the requirements of a system from users, customer, and the stakeholders. So this is the requirement engineering, requirement elicitation phase. So we have to discover all the requirements that are useful for designing or developing that particular project. So this is the requirement elicitation. So elicitation is important as many stakeholders, those are unable to accurately articulate for the business problems. So basically, elicitation means we have to gather each and every requirement of the system that we have to design or that we have to discover. So we have to calculate all the business problems for that particular system. So analysts performing the elicitation need to ensure that the requirement produced are very clear. So each and every requirement of the customer is clear, so that the developer develop that particular or the developer create the solution of that particular problem, that those are defined by the customer side. So requirement produced are clearly understandable, useful, and relevant. So the basic thing is that if the requirements are not cleared in the developer side from the user side, so the developer cannot develop the document properly that the user wants. So this is the basic point of view of the requirement elicitation. So number of techniques are present for that particular elicitation. Now first one is that interview. So what is interview basically? So interview is what? Interview means, so what is interview? So interview means we take a query session down between the customer and the developer. So someone asks the question and someone reply for these questions. So this is the basic interview part. So basically both parties have a common goal, because each and every one is develop the product or gather the requirements for that particular problem. So interview means we have to collect the requirements with the interview session, that someone asks the question, someone reply the answers, but these are defined in the two formats. First is the open-ended, second is the structured. So basically it is what? So interview are structured formed or the open-ended formed. So basically when it is structured form means there are a complete structured or there are complete define the rules and regulations of the interaction or the interview session between the customer and the developer. So this is the structured point of view. Open-ended means there is no way of defining the questions, of asking the questions. Everyone asks the questions for the customer, because there is not a single customer or a single developer. There is a committee. One side, one person asks the question to the next person asks the question to the another person. So this is the open-ended. Open-ended, there is no rule or there is no structure. So it is unstructured. Basically it is unstructured. So this is the open-ended. So basically interviews are two types. So this is the open-ended and the structured. Now the selection of stakeholders. So basically there are four terms that are the use for the selection of stakeholders. First is entry-level personnel. These are the basic stakeholders. Now the middle level stakeholders, these are the some experienced stakeholders, and the manager, these are the have many years of experience. So these are the managers, and the users of the software, those persons, those are directly use of that particular software. So these are the selection of stakeholders. So stakeholders are basically four types. First is entry level. These are the basic. These are the unexperienced persons or inexperienced developers. Those are presently involved on that particular project. So these are the entry level. Middle level means those have some experience or those have already done some projects. Managers, those have the high level of experience, high level of expertise, high level of domain experts. So these are the managers. And fourth are the users. Those are those are used of that particular software. So these are the 4 type of stakeholders. So I think we have to discuss next illustration techniques for the next lecture. Thank you so much.